Hey everyone, welcome to another deep dive with us.
Hi, everybody.
Today we're going to be talking about a sensitive topic, and that's preventing partner abuse. And we're going to be looking at Chapter 9 of the book, Breaking the Cycle of Abuse.
Great.
And this is a book that comes from a therapeutic perspective and offers a lot of insights and strategies for creating healthier relationships. And it's really important to remember, I think, as we go through this, that abuse can really touch anyone's life,
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
regardless of
It
background.
doesn't discriminate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the chapter starts off with this really compelling story about a woman named Vanessa. And her story really highlights how abuse can become a cycle repeating itself across generations.
Right.
So she faced years of abuse, starting with her father and then sadly continuing with her husband.
Right.
Um, can you even imagine the weight of that fear and pain, and the feeling of being trapped?
It's heartbreaking to think about. And, sadly, her story is not unique at all.
Right.
This is where that idea of repetition compulsion comes in. Yeah.
Which is, a fancy term.
Yeah.
But it basically means that we sometimes unconsciously recreate familiar relationship dynamics, even if those dynamics were unhealthy or abusive.
So even if we haven't personally experienced abuse ourselves, understanding this pattern can be valuable for anyone. Right?
Absolutely.
It's like we're drawn to what feels familiar, even if it's not good for us.
Yeah, exactly. Think back to your own relationships, even friendships.
Okay.
Have you ever noticed yourself being drawn to people who in some ways remind you of difficult figures from your past?
Yeah.
That might be repetition compulsion at work.
Wow.
It's not about blaming ourselves or anything.
Right.
It's about becoming aware of these patterns so we can make more conscious choices in the future.
Yeah, that's a really powerful insight. I think it really makes you realize how much our past can influence our present relationships.
For sure.
So how do we even begin to sort of unravel these patterns?
Yeah.
The book talks about reevaluating our relationships, but where do we even begin? Well, it starts with awareness, as we've been talking about.
Okay.
The book offers this exercise called Discover Your Pattern.
Okay.
And in this exercise, you essentially list the positive and negative personality traits
Okay.
of your past partners,
Got it.
and then compare them to those of your parents.
Hmm.
So it's almost like you're holding up a mirror to your relationship history.
I bet that can be pretty eye-opening for people.
It can be.
And maybe a little uncomfortable, too.
Oh, for sure. But that's the first step towards change.
Yeah.
Once you see those patterns, those similarities between the people you've been drawn to,
Right.
you can start to understand why you might be repeating certain dynamics.
Okay, so let's say someone's done that exercise and they're starting to recognize some patterns. How do they know if they're falling back into them? Are there any warning signs to kind of watch out for in a new relationship?
Yeah, for sure. So the book highlights some red flags, like, falling head over heels in love instantly,
Oh.
or feeling this like intense sense of familiarity, like you've known the person forever.
Right.
Those might actually be signs that you're being pulled towards those familiar but potentially harmful dynamics.
So that whirlwind romance feeling isn't always a good thing.
Exactly. It's not about judging those feelings,
Right.
but about recognizing that they might be masking something deeper.
Okay.
And that's why the book really emphasizes choosing partners wisely.
Right.
It even includes this questionnaire called How to Identify a Potential Abuser,
Wow.
which asks about things like jealousy and controlling behavior, anger issues,
Yeah.
any history of violence.
Yeah, those are some serious red flags, it sounds like. Taking your time to really get to know someone is really crucial.
Absolutely. Rushing into things can cloud your judgment
Sure.
and make it harder to see those warning signs.
It's about protecting yourself
Yeah,
and making conscious choices.
absolutely.
The book also talks about the importance of not losing yourself in a relationship, and I think that phrase really resonates with me, especially for someone who might be, recovering from abuse or trying to break free from those patterns.
It's about maintaining your sense of self,
Right.
your individuality, and for someone who's experienced abuse, this can be even more crucial.
Right.
So the book offers some practical tips like maintaining financial independence, having your own space, and most importantly, speaking up when you disagree or feel uncomfortable.
It's about setting those boundaries.
Yeah, exactly.
Boundaries. I'm all about boundaries. Can you elaborate a little bit more about how the book addresses that?
Yeah, so think of boundaries as your personal comfort zone.
Okay.
They define what you're okay with and what you're not okay with, both physically and emotionally.
Yeah.
So for example, imagine how close you're comfortable letting someone stand next to you.
Okay.
That's a simple example of a physical boundary.
Right.
Emotional boundaries are about what kind of treatment you'll accept from other people.
Right.
What feels okay for one person might feel disrespectful to another.
It's about respecting those individual differences.
Exactly, and it's about communicating your boundaries clearly.
Right.
If someone crosses a line, gently point it out,
Right.
ideally they'll apologize and be more mindful in the future.
Right.
But if those boundaries aren't respected, it might be time to reconsider the relationship.
It's about honoring your own needs and well-being.
Exactly.
It can be easy to fall into the trap of thinking our partners should fulfill all those unmet needs we might have from childhood,
Oh, for sure.
especially, if we've experienced difficult upbringings.
Yeah,
Um, but the book really warns against that.
absolutely.
Yeah.
You hit the nail on the head.
Yeah.
Because that kind of expectation can lead to a lot of disappointment and even recreate those unhealthy dynamics that we're trying to break free from.
It's about seeking a partner, not a parent figure,
Exactly.
right? It's about seeking an equal partner who can support us, not someone who's going to rescue us or try to fix us.
Right.
That reminds me of the example in the book about the female survivor always seeking rescue.
Right.
And how that can be a damaging dynamic.
Absolutely. Healthy relationships are built on two whole individuals coming together,
Right.
each with their own strengths and vulnerabilities.
And that kind of brings us to the next point that the book explores, which is making assumptions about our partners
Yeah,
and how those can be really dangerous.
absolutely. Assumptions can poison a relationship,
Right.
and past experiences, especially those involving abuse or neglect,
Right.
can really distort how we see our partners and interpret their actions.
It's like we're projecting our past hurt onto the present.
Yeah, we might start assuming the worst about their intentions, even if there's no evidence to support those assumptions.
The book shares Rosemary's story,
Yes.
which really illustrates this.
Right.
Her father was unfaithful
Yeah.
and made a lot of inappropriate advances toward her.
Right.
And she ended up carrying that experience into her marriage
Right.
and constantly assuming her husband would do the same things,
Yeah.
even though he was a completely different person.
It's a powerful example of how deeply those past wounds can impact our present relationships.
So the key is to kind of recognize those assumptions and question them.
Exactly.
The book suggests asking yourself, what else could this mean?
Right.
When you feel those familiar feelings of suspicion or distrust creeping in.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Consider alternative explanations before letting your past experiences dictate your present reality.
So instead of immediately jumping to those conclusions, try to consider different perspectives.
Yeah,
It's about giving our partners the benefit of the doubt and being open to other interpretations.
exactly. And this leads to another important point the book makes,
Okay.
which is taking responsibility for our own feelings and projections.
So that's recognizing that just because we feel upset, it doesn't automatically mean that the other person is wrong or doing something to hurt us,
Right.
right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Sometimes our reactions are more about our own past experiences
That's
than
right.
about our partner's actions.
Yeah, the book uses the example of Suzanne, who would get incredibly angry whenever her husband turned up the TV.
Yeah.
And, it turned out that her anger wasn't really about the TV volume.
Right.
It was a trigger that brought back all these painful memories of her alcoholic father who used to blast the TV when he was drunk.
It's a great example of how those unconscious connections can shape our reactions.
Yeah, I never really realized how powerful those triggers could be until I read that story.
Yeah,
It's amazing.
it is.
So the book really emphasizes the importance of becoming aware of our triggers, those things that kind of send us into an emotional tailspin.
Right.
And it's not about suppressing those feelings.
Right.
It's about understanding where they're coming from
Right.
and finding healthier ways to cope.
Exactly.
Once we know our triggers, we can start communicating them to our partners.
Yeah.
And creating more understanding in the relationship.
Absolutely. And this ties into another crucial aspect of healthy relationships that the book addresses, and that is empathy.
Empathy, that's about understanding and sharing the feelings of others, right?
Yeah.
And it seems like that would be essential for any relationship,
Absolutely.
but especially one where someone might be, recovering from past abuse.
You're absolutely right. But the book points out that past abuse or neglect can make it really difficult to empathize.
It makes sense if you think about it.
It does.
If you've been hurt, it's hard to trust others and connect with their emotions.
Exactly. It's like a protective mechanism.
Right.
Yeah.
So how do you build those empathy skills if they've been damaged by past experiences?
Well, the book suggests an exercise called imaginary letters.
Imaginary letters. That sounds kind of intriguing. What does that involve?
So the idea is to write letters to yourself,
Okay.
but from the perspective of your partner or your children.
Okay.
Imagine you're them, And you're writing about how you feel when you're at your worst, when you're triggered, or when you're lashing out.
Wow, that sounds intense.
It can be, but it's also incredibly insightful.
Yeah.
It really forces you to step outside of yourself. Right.
And consider the impact of your behavior on the people you care about.
It's about seeing things from their point of view.
Exactly. And that's essential for building healthier and more compassionate relationships.
This chapter is just full of such valuable insights.
Yeah.
And I love how it moves into this area of conflict resolution,
Yeah.
which can be a real challenge for anyone,
Absolutely.
especially for those who have experienced abuse.
Right.
But it starts by reminding us that conflict is a normal part of any relationship,
It's so true.
which is really reassuring to hear.
It is. Conflict is inevitable.
Yeah.
It's how we handle it that determines whether it will bring us closer or tear us apart.
And the book offers some really practical advice
Yeah.
on how to handle conflict constructively.
Right.
Talks about the importance of agreeing to disagree
Yeah.
and taking time outs when things get heated.
Absolutely.
I love that idea of agreeing to disagree.
Sometimes you just have to accept that you're not going to see eye to eye on everything, and that's okay.
Right.
It's about letting go of the need to be right all the time.
Exactly. And taking those time outs is so crucial
Yeah.
when emotions are running high.
Right.
It allows everyone to cool down and approach the situation more rationally,
Right.
which can prevent things from, escalating into a big argument.
Yeah, that makes sense. When you're feeling flooded with emotions, it's hard to think clearly and communicate effectively.
Exactly. Taking a break gives you a chance to calm down,
Yeah.
gather your thoughts before you try to, have a conversation.
Right. And then when you were ready to have that difficult conversation, the book talks about using fair fighting techniques, right?
Right. It's about having those disagreements without resorting to personal attacks or insults or manipulation.
Do you have any examples of what those fair fighting rules might look like?
Absolutely. So the book emphasizes things like sticking to one issue at a time,
Okay.
avoiding bringing up past grievances, using I statements to express your feelings,
Right.
and actively listening to your partner's perspective.
Those are great guidelines. It's about communicating with respect, even when you're disagreeing.
Exactly. And remembering that the goal is to find a solution that works for both of you, not to win the argument.
It's about collaboration and compromise,
Exactly.
not about power struggles.
Right. And the book also emphasizes the importance of seeking professional help.
Yeah,
If you're finding it difficult to resolve conflicts constructively on your own.
that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, sometimes you need a neutral third party
Right.
to help facilitate those conversations
Right.
and create a safe space for communication.
Sometimes you need that extra support.
Absolutely.
So we've covered a lot of ground here,
Yeah.
in terms of preventing abuse in relationships.
Yeah.
It's about understanding those cyclical patterns, recognizing red flags, setting boundaries, choosing partners wisely, not losing ourselves,
Yeah,
managing triggers, cultivating empathy,
for sure.
practicing fair fighting techniques.
Yeah, it's a lot to take in.
It is a lot to take in.
But remember, it's a journey, not a destination.
Right.
You don't have to master all of this overnight.
Right.
Even small steps towards self-awareness and healthier communication
Yeah.
can make a big difference.
That's a great reminder. We'll continue exploring more of these insights from Breaking the Cycle of Abuse when we return for part 2 of our deep dive.
Sounds great. So welcome back.
I'm ready to keep diving in.
Yeah.
This information is so valuable.
Absolutely.
We were talking about how conflict is a natural part of any relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And the book actually provides this really practical tool to help people assess if the conflict they're experiencing might be a sign of something more serious.
Right.
It's a questionnaire called, Are You a Victim of Domestic Abuse?
Yeah, that's right. This assessment can be a really powerful way to kind of check in with yourself
Right.
and honestly evaluate your relationship.
Yeah.
Sometimes we might minimize or rationalize
Right.
things our partners do, so having a clear list of warning signs can be a real wake-up call.
It's like having an objective lens to kind of look through things,
Yeah.
especially if you're feeling confused or unsure.
Absolutely.
The first question that jumped out at me was about threats.
Hmm.
The book says that if your partner is threatening to hurt you,
Yeah,
that's a huge red flag.
absolutely. Threats should never be taken lightly.
Right.
They can be incredibly scary and are often a precursor to physical violence. So it's important to, trust your gut instinct
Right.
if you're feeling threatened and to seek help if you need it.
The next question focuses on fear.
Right.
It asks, if you're constantly afraid of your partner,
Yeah.
I think that really speaks volumes about the state of the relationship.
It does. Fear is a powerful emotion,
Right.
and it shouldn't be a constant presence in a healthy relationship.
Right.
You're walking on eggshells, always worried about upsetting your partner or triggering their anger.
Yeah.
That's a sign of an unhealthy power dynamic.
It's like you're not able to truly be yourself, to relax and feel comfortable just being you.
Exactly.
And the assessment also delves into, your partner's behavior when they're drinking.
Right.
It asks, does their behavior become rough or violent when they've had alcohol?
Yeah,
That's such a crucial question to consider.
it is. And it's important to remember that alcohol doesn't cause abuse,
Right.
but it can lower inhibitions
Yeah.
and make people more likely to act out in aggressive ways.
So if your partner becomes abusive when they're drinking,
Right.
it's essential to address that issue.
Yeah.
And seeking professional help might be a crucial step.
Absolutely.
Another red flag that the book highlights is blaming.
Yeah.
Does your partner constantly blame others for their problems?
Right.
Never taking responsibility for their own actions.
That's a classic pattern.
Yeah.
In abusive relationships, it's a way for the abuser to avoid accountability
Right.
and maintain a sense of control.
Right.
And it can leave you feeling like you're always the one at fault,
Right.
even when you're not.
It's like a never-ending cycle of blame and guilt.
Exactly. And this ties into another question.
Right.
On the assessment anger.
Right.
Does your partner frequently explode in a rage?
Those explosive outbursts can be so frightening and intimidating.
They can be.
It's definitely not a healthy way to handle anger or conflict.
It's not,
Yeah.
it's important to distinguish between healthy expressions of anger
Right.
and those that are destructive and meant to control or intimidate.
Right. And sometimes that rage can turn physical.
Yeah.
The assessment asks if your partner throws objects or breaks things when they're angry.
Right.
That's a pretty scary escalation of behavior.
It is absolutely. It's a clear sign of aggression,
Yeah.
and it's a potential precursor to physical violence towards you.
Right.
It's a way of venting their anger
Right.
in a way that's intimidating
Right.
and creates a sense of fear.
This questionnaire really gets into some tough topics, but it's so important to be aware of these warning signs. One question that really stood out to me was about your partner's treatment of pets.
Yeah.
Have they ever deliberately hurt a pet?
That might seem like an odd question to include,
Right.
but it's incredibly important
Right.
because hurting animals can be a sign of deep-seated cruelty
Yeah.
and a lack of empathy.
Yeah, it's like they lack the capacity to care for and respect other living beings.
Exactly. And it can also be a predictor of violence towards humans.
Another question that jumped out at me was about having a Jekyll and Hyde personality.
Ooh, yeah.
Does your partner kind of switch back and forth between being charming and abusive?
That's a classic characteristic of abusers. They can be incredibly charismatic and loving one minute,
Yeah.
then turn cold and cruel and abusive the next.
Right.
And this unpredictable behavior
Yeah.
can be very confusing and manipulative for the victim.
Yeah.
It's like being on an emotional roller coaster.
That keeps you constantly off balance.
It's exact.
Never knowing what you're going to get.
Yeah, and that makes it harder to recognize the abuse for what it is and
Right.
to leave the relationship.
Right.
The abuser might apologize and shower you with affection after an outburst,
Right.
making you believe that things will change
Right.
only to repeat the cycle again.
That cycle can be so hard to break free from.
It can be.
The questionnaire also asks about feeling pressured to give in during arguments,
Yeah,
just to kind of avoid your partner's anger or potential violence.
right.
I think a lot of people could relate to that.
That's a common experience in abusive relationships, It's about silencing yourself
Yeah.
to avoid conflict,
Yeah.
even if it means sacrificing your own needs and opinions.
It's like you're constantly walking on eggshells, afraid to express your true feelings.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Healthy relationships allow for open communication
Right.
and respectful disagreements.
Right.
It's okay to have different opinions
Right.
and to express them without fear of reprisal.
Right. It's about feeling safe to be yourself.
Yeah.
And to express yourself authentically.
Absolutely. And that safety extends to your children as well.
Right?
The questionnaire asks if your children are afraid of your partner when they're
Mhm.
angry.
Yeah.
That's a heartbreaking question to consider.
It is.
But it's so important because children are incredibly perceptive.
They are.
They pick up on that tension and fear,
Yeah.
even if it's not explicitly directed at them.
Right. And witnessing abuse can be incredibly traumatic for children.
It can.
Even if they're not the direct targets.
Right.
It can shape their own understanding of relationships
Yeah.
and how they interact with others.
Absolutely.
It's a cycle that can repeat itself if we're not aware of it. and
Right.
actively working to break it.
Exactly. The assessment also touches on the issue of isolation.
Okay.
It asks if you're afraid to have friends or family over
Right.
for fear of your partner exploding.
That's another common tactic used by abusers.
It is.
They want to limit their partner's support network
Right.
and make them more dependent on them.
Right, they might try to control who you talk to,
Right.
where you go, what you do,
Yeah.
all in the name of love or concern.
It can be so subtle at first,
Yeah.
but it's about power and control.
That's exactly what the next set of questions gets at.
Okay.
They focus on controlling behavior.
Okay.
Things like listening in on your phone calls,
Right.
constantly accusing you of doing things behind their back,
Hmm.
insisting on going everywhere with you being suspicious of your every move.
Wow, that sounds suffocating.
It can be.
It's like you're not allowed to have any privacy or independence.
Exactly. It's about restricting your freedom
Yeah.
and making you feel trapped.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, that control can often extend to the sexual realm as well.
Right.
So the assessment asks if your partner has ever forced you to have sex even though you didn't want to.
Right. And that's sexual assault.
It is.
And it's never okay.
Never.
Consent is crucial in any sexual encounter.
Absolutely no one has the right to force you to engage in any sexual activity
Mhm.
without your clear and enthusiastic consent.
The questionnaire also brings up a situation that can be really frightening.
Yeah.
It asks, have you ever called or thought about calling the police
Right.
because an argument was getting out of control?
Yeah.
That's a sign that things have escalated to a pretty dangerous level.
It is. It's a sign that you don't feel safe
Right.
in your own home, which is a basic human right.
Right.
So if you're ever in a situation where you feel threatened or unsafe,
Right.
don't hesitate to call for help.
That can be such a difficult step to take.
It can.
But it's so important to remember that, your safety is the top priority.
Absolutely. And remember, there are resources available to support you,
Right.
like domestic violence hotlines
Right.
and shelters. You're not alone.
The last question on the assessment asks if your partner has ever threatened to take the kids away
Yeah.
if you leave them, and that's just heartbreaking.
It's a cruel, manipulative tactic.
It is.
They're using your children as pawns
Yeah.
to try to control you and prevent you from leaving.
It's about instilling fear and making you feel trapped.
Exactly. It's important to remember that you have rights.
Right.
You deserve to be safe and respected.
Yes.
Both you and your children.
This questionnaire covers such a wide range of behaviors.
It does.
And it's sobering to realize how many different forms abuse can take.
It is. And it's important to remember that even if your partner hasn't exhibited all of these behaviors,
Right.
the presence of even a few of them is a
Right.
serious cause for concern.
Yeah.
It's about recognizing the patterns
Right.
and taking steps to protect yourself.
What's the overall message you think the book is trying to convey with this assessment?
I think it's about empowerment.
Yeah.
It's about giving you the knowledge and the tools
Right.
to assess your situation honestly,
Right.
to make informed choices.
Right. You deserve to be in a safe and loving relationship.
You do.
And if you're experiencing any of these warning signs, it's crucial to reach out for help.
Absolutely.
That's such an important message.
Yeah.
It can be so difficult to admit that you're in an abusive relationship.
It can.
But the first step towards getting help is recognizing that you're not alone
Right.
and that you deserve better.
Exactly. And it's important to remember
Yeah.
that abuse is never the victim's fault.
Right.
The responsibility for the abusive behavior lies solely with the abuser.
That's such an important reminder.
Yeah.
So what steps can someone take to prevent abuse in their relationships?
Yeah.
Even if they've experienced abuse in the past.
Well, the book kind of shifts gears a bit here and
Okay.
starts talking about some practical strategies.
Okay.
And it starts with the idea of choosing to have equal relationships.
Choosing equal relationships. Okay, so what does that mean?
Yeah, what does it mean to have an equal relationship?
Yeah.
Well, it means seeking out partners who treat you as an equal,
Okay.
who respect your opinions, your values, and your boundaries.
It's about finding someone who sees you as a partner,
Mm.
not a subordinate.
Exactly.
Someone who wants to share their life with you, not control you.
Right. And it also means being willing to walk away from relationships where
Yeah.
there's an imbalance of power.
Right.
Even if you're attracted to that person, it's
Yeah.
about recognizing those unhealthy patterns
Right.
and choosing something different for yourself.
That takes a lot of courage and self-awareness.
It does, but it's so worth it.
Yeah.
And the book emphasizes the importance of taking your time
Right.
to choose your partner wisely.
Yeah.
Rushing into things can make it harder to see those red flags we talked about earlier.
It's like that saying, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me.
Exactly.
We can learn from our past experiences and make more conscious choices
Hmm.
about who we let into our lives.
Right. Choosing a partner who's genuinely kind, respectful, and trustworthy
Right.
takes time and patience.
Yeah.
It's about observing their actions over time, seeing how they treat you,
Right.
not just listening to their words.
Right. It's about paying attention to how you feel in the relationship,
Yeah,
not just how the other person makes you feel.
exactly. And the book also talks about the importance of not losing yourself
Right.
in a relationship.
Which I think is so crucial,
It is.
especially, if you've experienced abuse or neglect in the past.
It's easy to get swept up
It is.
in a new relationship and start molding yourself
That-
to fit your partner's expectations.
Right.
But it's so essential to maintain your sense of self, to
Yeah.
have your own interests,
Right.
hobbies and friends.
Right.
You're a whole person,
Right.
not just someone's partner.
Right. The book actually offers this whole list of tips
It does.
for how to do that.
Yeah.
It suggests things like, being honest about who you are and what you want, maintaining time for yourself, keeping your own friends and social life, not allowing yourself to become isolated, remaining financially independent, maintaining your own separate space, not changing who you are just to please your partner,
Right.
speaking up when you disagree or don't like how you're being treated, not allowing your partner to make decisions for you,
Right.
and remembering that, your opinions and feelings are valid.
Wow, that's quite a list.
That's a good list.
It is. It's all about balance.
Right.
Healthy relationships allow both partners
Yeah.
to thrive as individuals while also nurturing the connection between them.
It's about having a life both inside and outside the relationship.
Exactly.
The book also emphasizes the importance of setting and enforcing appropriate boundaries and limits.
Yes.
Which is something we touched on earlier, but it's such a crucial topic.
It is. Boundaries are essential
They are.
for healthy relationships.
Yeah.
They define what you're comfortable with and what you're not comfortable with,
Right.
both physically and emotionally. It's
Yeah.
about protecting your own well-being
Right.
and making sure your needs are being met.
Right. And it's about communicating those boundaries clearly
Yeah,
to your partner so that they know what your limits are.
exactly. It's not about controlling them.
Right.
It's about letting them know what you will and will not tolerate.
Right.
And the book actually provides a really helpful exercise
Oh.
for establishing your boundaries.
Okay.
So it suggests listing the kinds of behavior
Okay.
that bother you most.
Got it.
The behaviors that push your buttons
Right.
or behaviors that are morally unacceptable to you.
Right.
And it also suggests making a list of your personal limits
Okay.
regarding your partner's behavior.
It's about getting really clear on what's important to you and what you're willing to compromise on.
Exactly. And then once you've identified those boundaries,
Right.
the next step is to communicate them to your partner.
Right.
They can't respect your boundaries
Right.
if they don't know what they are.
Right.
So it's about having an open and honest conversation
Yeah.
about what you're both comfortable with.
Right.
And it's also about being willing to enforce those boundaries.
Right.
If someone repeatedly crosses a line,
Yeah.
even after you've communicated it,
Right.
that's a sign that they're not respecting you.
Right. It's about standing up for yourself
Yeah,
and what you deserve.
absolutely.
The book also warns against having unreasonable expectations of your partner.
Right.
It can be easy to fall into that trap,
It can.
especially, if you've experienced abuse or neglect in the past.
Right. It's common to look to our partners
Yeah.
to fulfill all those unmet needs we
Right.
might have from childhood.
Yeah. But that's setting yourself up for disappointment.
You are.
Right.
And it can even recreate those unhealthy dynamics that we're trying to break free from.
Right. It's about recognizing that your partner is a separate individual
Right.
with their own needs and limitations.
Right.
They can't be everything to you.
They can't. Healthy relationships
Right.
are about mutual support and respect.
Yeah.
Not about one person trying to rescue or fix the other.
It's about recognizing that we're all responsible
Yes.
for our own healing and happiness.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
And this ties into the next topic that the book dives into,
Okay.
which is the dangers of making assumptions
Right.
in relationships.
Yeah, we talked about this a little bit earlier,
We did.
but it's so important.
It is, those assumptions
Yeah.
can be sneaky
They can be.
and so destructive. They're often based on past experiences,
Right.
and they can really distort how we see our partners and
Wow.
interpret their actions.
Right.
So it's really important to question those assumptions
Right.
and to communicate openly with your partner about
Yeah.
what's going on for you.
Right. The book gives that really powerful example of Rosemary,
It does.
whose father was unfaithful
Right,
and sexually inappropriate with her.
right.
And she ended up carrying those experiences into her marriage,
Right.
constantly assuming her husband would behave the same way,
Yeah.
even though he was a completely different person.
It's a classic example of how those past wounds can really cloud our judgment
Yeah.
and lead to unfounded suspicions and accusations.
Right. So it's about recognizing how those past experiences might be coloring your perceptions in the present.
Exactly. The book suggests asking yourself,
Yeah.
what else could this mean?
Right.
When you find yourself, getting upset or suspicious
Right.
of your partner's behavior.
So instead of jumping to conclusions,
Yeah.
try to consider those alternative explanations.
Right. It's about giving your partner the benefit of the doubt
Right.
and being open to hearing their perspective.
It's about challenging those old narratives
Yeah.
that might be playing out in your mind.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
It's about recognizing that your partner is not your past.
Right. And it's also about recognizing that our partners aren't responsible for healing our past wounds.
Absolutely. It's our responsibility
Right.
to do that work, either through therapy or self-help,
Right.
so that we don't project our past onto our present relationships.
It's about taking ownership
Yes.
of our own healing and growth.
That's right.
The book then moves into this area of taking responsibility
Yeah.
for our own feelings, reactions, and projections.
Right.
That sounds like a challenging but important step.
It is. It's a key aspect of emotional maturity.
Yeah.
It's about recognizing that our feelings are our own
Right.
and that we have the power to choose how we respond to them.
It's about not blaming our partners for our emotional state.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's about recognizing that sometimes our reactions
Right.
are triggered by past experiences,
Yeah.
not by anything our partner has done.
Yeah. The book uses that example of Suzanne, who would get so angry
Yeah.
whenever her husband turned up the volume on the television.
Yeah.
It turned out that, her anger wasn't really about the TV.
Yeah.
It was a trigger
Right.
that brought back all these painful memories of her alcoholic father who used to blast the TV when he was drunk.
It's a classic example of how those past traumas can manifest
Yeah.
in unexpected ways in our present relationships.
It's about those unconscious connections
Yeah.
that we might not even be aware of.
That's why the book emphasizes the importance of identifying our triggers,
Right.
those things that send us into an emotional tailspin.
Mhm.
And once we know our triggers, we
Yeah.
can start to manage them more effectively. We
Yeah.
can communicate them to our partners.
Right.
We can develop coping mechanisms
Yeah.
to help us stay grounded
Yeah.
when those triggers are activated.
It's about taking back control of your emotional responses.
Exactly. And this ties into another important piece of the puzzle,
Okay.
developing our empathy skills.
Empathy is the ability to understand and share the feelings of others.
It is.
It seems like that would be so crucial for any healthy relationship.
It is, but the book explains that past abuse or neglect
Right?
can hinder our ability to empathize with others.
Yeah.
And it makes sense if you think about it. If
Mhm.
you've been hurt or betrayed,
Right.
it can be hard to trust others.
Right.
And to open yourself up to their emotional experiences.
Right. It's like you're protecting yourself from further pain.
Exactly.
So how can someone build their empathy skills if they've been damaged by past experiences?
Well, the book suggests a really powerful exercise
Okay.
called imaginary letters.
Imaginary letters, we talked about those earlier, right?
Yes, that's right.
Okay.
The idea is to write letters to yourself,
Right.
but from the perspective of your partner or your children.
Right.
Imagine you're them and you're writing about how you feel
Right.
when you're at your worst, when you're triggered, or when you're lashing out.
Right. It's about putting yourself in their shoes,
Exactly.
trying to see the world through their eyes.
It can be a difficult exercise,
Yeah.
but it's incredibly insightful.
Yeah.
It really forces you to step outside of yourself
Right.
and to consider the impact of your behavior
Right.
on those you love.
It's about cultivating compassion and understanding.
Exactly. And that's a crucial foundation for healthy, non-abusive relationships.
Okay, so we've talked about choosing equal relationships, taking our time to choose partners wisely, not losing ourselves in relationship setting and enforcing boundaries, having reasonable expectations, not making assumptions, taking responsibility for our feelings and projections, and developing our empathy skills.
We have.
That's a lot of information.
It is.
What else does chapter kind of cover?
Well, from here, the book delves into the, challenging
Right.
but essential realm of conflict resolution.
Right.
And it starts by acknowledging
Yeah.
that conflict is a normal part of any relationship.
That's reassuring to hear.
It is. It's easy to feel like conflict is a sign that something is wrong,
Right.
but it's actually a natural part
Yeah.
of being in a relationship with another human being.
Yeah, we're all individuals with our own thoughts, feelings, and needs.
Exact.
It's inevitable that those will sometimes clash,
They will.
but it's how we handle those conflicts that
Yes.
determines whether they'll strengthen or weaken our relationships.
Exactly.
The book emphasizes the importance of agreeing to disagree
Yeah.
and taking time outs when things get heated.
Absolutely.
I love that idea of agreeing to disagree.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just have to accept that you're not going to see eye to eye on everything,
Right.
and that's okay.
Right. It's about letting go of the need to be right all the time.
Right.
And recognizing that your partner has a valid perspective,
Right.
even if it's different from yours.
Right. And taking time outs is so crucial
It is.
when emotions are running high.
It allows everyone to cool down
Right.
and approach the situation
Yeah.
more calmly and rationally.
It's like hitting the pause button before things escalate into a full-blown argument.
Exactly. It gives you a chance to step back,
Yeah.
process your emotions, gather your thoughts
Right.
before trying to communicate with your partner.
And then when you are ready to have that difficult conversation,
Right.
the book talks about using those fair fighting techniques, right?
That's right. You
Yeah.
know, it's about having those disagreements constructively
Right.
without resorting to personal attacks or insults or manipulation.
Right. Can you give us some examples of what those fair fighting rules might look like?
Of course. So the book suggests sticking to one issue at a time,
Okay.
avoiding bringing up past grievances,
Right.
using I statements to express your feelings,
Right.
and actively listening to your partner's perspective.
Those are great guidelines.
They are.
It's about communicating with respect, even when you're disagreeing.
Exactly. And remembering that the goal is to find a solution that works for both of you,
Right.
not to win the argument.
It's about collaboration and compromise, not about power struggles.
Right. And the book also emphasizes the importance of seeking professional help if you're finding it difficult to resolve conflicts constructively on your own.
Right. Sometimes you just need that neutral third party
You do?
to kind of help facilitate those conversations and create a safe space for communication.
Absolutely.
That makes a lot of sense.
Right.
Sometimes you need a little extra support.
You do. And remember, there are many qualified therapists out there
Right.
who specialize in helping couples
Okay.
improve their communication and conflict resolution skills.
So we've talked about choosing equal relationships, taking our time to choose partners wisely, not losing ourselves in relationship setting and enforcing boundaries, having reasonable expectations, not making assumptions, taking responsibility for our feelings and projections, developing our empathy skills, and practicing fair fighting techniques.
Wow.
That's a lot of valuable information.
It is a lot, but remember,
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
all about progress, not perfection.
Right.
You know, it's a journey,
Right.
not a destination. Right.
You don't have to master all of this overnight.
Right.
Even small steps, quote,
Yeah.
self-awareness and healthy
Yeah.
communication
Mm.
can make a big difference.
That's a great point.
It is.
You know, it's about being patient with yourself
Yeah,
and celebrating those small wins along the way.
exactly. And it's important to be kind to yourself. You know, if you're working on breaking free
Right.
from these unhealthy patterns, it's natural to stumble along the way.
Right.
So don't give up on yourself.
Right.
Keep learning, keep growing,
Yeah.
keep reaching out for support when you need it.
This has been such an insightful and empowering conversation.
It has.
We'll delve into even more practical strategies for preventing abuse when we return for the final part of our deep dive. Welcome back to the final part of our deep dive into Chapter 9 of Breaking the Cycle of Abuse.
Glad to be here.
Before the break, we were talking about those fair fighting techniques.
You know, the tools for navigating conflict constructively.
Yeah.
And it seems like it takes a lot of self-awareness and emotional regulation to argue fairly, you know,
It does.
especially when things are getting heated.
Yeah, especially if you've, witnessed or experienced
Mhm.
unhealthy conflict resolution patterns in the past.
Right.
But that's where the book's guidance is so helpful.
Yeah.
It provides those practical steps
Right.
to help you break those old patterns and develop healthier ways to communicate
Right.
during disagreements.
So can you give us some specific examples of those guidelines?
Sure. One of the first things the book suggests is to make sure you won't be interrupted
Yeah.
during those conversations.
Yeah.
It sounds simple,
Right.
but, turning off your phones, silencing the TV, waiting till the kids are asleep,
Right.
can make a huge difference in creating that safe space for open communication.
It's like setting yourself up for success
Exactly.
by removing those potential distractions and triggers.
Yeah.
You know, creating that calm and focused environment
Right.
can make it so much easier to have those difficult conversations.
Absolutely.
And then once you've created that space, it's about Focusing on the specific issue at hand.
Right. Stay in the present moment.
Yeah.
Avoid bringing up past grievances
Right.
or, dredging up old arguments.
Which can be so tempting
It is.
when you're feeling hurt or angry.
Especially.
Yeah, it's easy to let things spiral out of control
It is.
when you start bringing up every little thing that's ever bothered you.
But remember, the goal is to resolve the current issue,
Right.
not to rehash every past hurt.
The book also emphasizes the importance of using I statements
Yes.
to express your feelings rather than blaming or accusing your partner.
Right.
So, for example, instead of saying, "You always make me feel like this,"
Right.
you could say, "I feel hurt when this happens."
Exactly. That's such a classic communication technique,
Right.
but it's so effective.
It's about owning your experience
Yeah.
without pointing fingers.
Exactly. And it helps to kind of de-escalate the situation
Right.
and encourages your partner to listen
Yeah.
and understand your perspective
Yeah.
without feeling attacked.
And then, just as important as expressing your own feelings is actively listening
Yes.
to your partner's perspective.
Absolutely.
Really trying to understand where they're coming from,
I do.
even if you don't agree with them.
Exactly. It's about empathy
Right?
and validation.
Right. It's about letting your partner know that their feelings matter
Yeah.
and that you're hearing them.
And remember, the goal isn't to win the argument,
Right.
but to find a solution
Yeah.
that works for both of you.
It's about approaching the conflict as a team,
Exactly.
working together to find a compromise.
Right. And if you find yourself kind of stuck in those same patterns of conflict,
Yeah.
unable to find common ground,
Right.
the book recommends seeking professional help.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Oh.
Sometimes you need that neutral third party
Right.
to help you navigate those difficult conversations
Right.
and develop healthier communication patterns.
Sometimes you need that extra support.
Absolutely.
So we've talked about understanding the cyclical nature of abuse, recognizing red flags, setting boundaries, choosing partners wisely, maintaining your sense of self,
Right.
managing triggers, cultivating empathy,
Yeah.
practicing fair fighting techniques.
It's a lot.
The book then reminds us about the importance of recognizing those early signs of abuse,
Right.
not just in our own relationships, but also in the relationships of those around us.
It's about being aware of those subtle behaviors
Right.
that can indicate that a relationship is heading in an unhealthy direction.
Right. It's about being able to spot those red flags before things escalate.
Exactly.
So what are some of those red flags that the book highlights?
Well, the book mentions behaviors like embarrassing or making fun of your partner in public,
Okay.
putting down their accomplishments, constantly questioning their decisions, using intimidation or threats to get your way,
Right.
acting possessive and controlling,
Right.
isolating them from their friends and family,
Right.
exhibiting those unpredictable mood swings.
Yeah.
That Jekyll and Hyde personality we talked about earlier.
Right. So it sounds like it's about paying attention to those subtle shifts in the power dynamic
Exactly.
and addressing them before they escalate into more serious forms of abuse.
And remembering that abuse isn't always physical.
Right.
Emotional and psychological abuse
Right.
can be just as damaging,
Right.
if not more so, because it often goes undetected
Right.
for longer.
So it's about recognizing those less obvious forms of abuse
Yes,
and taking them just as seriously.
absolutely.
This has been such a thought-provoking conversation.
It has.
What would you say are some of the key takeaways
Yeah.
that our listeners can kind of apply to their own lives?
I think the most important takeaway is that we all have a role to play in preventing abuse. And it starts with understanding the dynamics of abuse,
Right.
recognizing the warning signs,
Right.
and being willing to speak up if we see something that's not right,
Right.
either in our own relationships or in the relationships of those around us.
It's about creating a culture where abuse is not tolerated
Exactly.
and where those who have experienced abuse feel safe to come forward and seek help.
Absolutely. And it's about supporting those who have experienced abuse,
Right.
letting them know that they're not alone
Right.
and that there's help available.
Absolutely.
Offering a listening ear, validating their experiences, encouraging them to reach out for professional support
Yeah.
if they need it.
Before we wrap up this deep dive, is there a final thought you'd like to leave our listeners with?
How about this? Think about the relationships in your own life.
Okay.
How can you apply these insights from breaking the cycle of abuse
Right.
to build healthier and more fulfilling connections?
Yeah.
How can you advocate for yourself and for others? Setting boundaries, communicating effectively,
Yes.
creating a culture of respect and understanding.
That's a great question for all of us to reflect on.
It is.
Well, thank you so much for guiding us through this complex and important topic.
You're welcome.
And to our listeners, remember, you're not alone. There are resources available.
There are.
If you or someone you know is experiencing abuse, reach out for help. You deserve to be safe and respected. Thanks for joining us for another deep dive.